Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please take your seats. The session is about to begin.
Please welcome the Chair of the Board for the World Green Building Council, Lisa Bate.
Good afternoon, everybody. We have a great session for you. We're going to start off with the speaker, Bassema Abdurrahman, and she is from KESK, Green Building Consulting, and she is going to give us a short presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, use the word short, hoping.
Remember the first time you were inspired by some great purpose? Your thoughts broke their bonds and you were finally able to find pleasure and meaning in life. Maybe yours was a decade ago or a week ago. My moment was back in August 2014 when the terrorist group called ISIS, or also known as Daesh, occupied one of the main big cities in Iraq. I still had another semester to finish my graduate degree in the United States. It was one of the most devastating times. The conflict and violence hit the country, threatening its stability and existence. The night the conflict started, I couldn't sleep. I feared for my family and relatives on one side and worried about the fate of the country on the other side. Also, I felt ashamed and sad I'll be associated with terrorism. Then, on that specific night, I made my vow to go back to Iraq and do something good and meaningful. Starting and building a business around the concept of green building concept in Iraq at the time where most are focused on military operations, the economic crisis, and political conflict was a tough task, but I believed in it. It was, despite all the difficulties faced at the beginning, we did not slow down because we knew this will bring good and benefit to the region. Urban cities and communities play a vital role in global consumption, protection, and pollution as the majority of the global population lives in urban areas. Buildings use around 40% of global energy, 25% of global water, 40% of global resources, and they emit approximately 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, designing buildings to meet sustainability features is one of the key strategies to reduce contribution to climate change. Iraq is facing severe environmental issues due to years of conflict. The estimated cost of environmental degradation in Iraq is 6.4% of GDPs, or $5.5 billion a year, affecting the health of the country's economy. Plus, Iraq was classified as one of the top 5 countries in terms of vulnerability to climate change. Knowing the consequences of the poor development of cities on people and environment, we started looking for ways and solutions to minimize its negative impact. Hence, KESK was born. Our mission is to help government, private sectors, and individuals to obtain green strategies and solutions. The aim is to make sure that current development do no harm to future generations through the integration of the triple bottom line concept: people, planet, and profit. We human beings have inhabited planet Earth, and we've been using its resources for thousands of years. As intelligent beings, we became smarter and better in the way we live, produce, and consume. Learning from our own mistakes and successes, We're getting better every step of the way, but we're not there yet. We have reached a turning point where we all collectively have to make a decision, a responsible one, to make sure that our action today does no harm to the interests of the future generations. With over 5,000 years of experience in building design and construction, it's about time to start building smartly and sustainably. Buildings last for decades, so we need to start acting now to build the climate-safe world we want and we need by 2050. We have the engineering expertise to make this happen. Now we need private sector and government to commission these buildings. I congratulate the leadership shown by the speakers you will hear in this session and their commitment to net zero carbon buildings. Our shared vision today is to create a world where smart solutions are implemented to ensure a healthy and safe environment for all. So, let's do it.
Thank you, Basma. That was fantastic. Next, it gives me honor to introduce John Kilroy. John is the CEO of Kilroy Realty, and he'll be out shortly.
Hello. Well, I got to tell you, to have an industrial, or rather a structural engineer from Iraq here is amazing, and what an accomplished young lady. So, Lisa, thanks for introducing me. I'm John Kilroy, the CEO of Kilroy Realty Corporation. We're headquartered here on the West Coast. It didn't give me very much time, so I'm going to speak really quickly. We own and operate about $11 billion of properties within our portfolio, mostly office, but also residential, life science, and retail. We have another $6 billion or so underway, and I call them the invisible buildings. That's right, invisible. Sure, they're tangible. They exist. I know, I get the rent. But when the world thinks of how to solve environmental problems, until now, buildings, whether they're schools, factories, office buildings, whatever they might be, they really haven't been focused on, and yet they represent 40% of the carbon footprint. The little video they're going to show you, I think, tells you that. So 40%. So I'm here to tell you that era ends now, at least with regard to Kilroy. We're going to change the conversation. I'm here today to commit Kilroy Realty Corporation to carbon neutral operations by the end of 2020. Not 2030, as California law just was signed by Governor Brown, 2020. And it's been a big effort to get here, and we're very proud to announce this. So how did we get here? You know, I'm a public company. We're in the New York Stock Exchange. We're not the typical, prototypical, at least, environmental disruptors. But about 10 years ago, we got involved in LEED buildings in Southern California and then here in Northern California. Everything we do is LEED Platinum or Gold. We built the first 2 LEED Platinum ground-up buildings here in San Francisco for Dropbox's headquarters and 350 Mission, where Mark Benioff resides. We saw sustainability as another way to show leadership to our clients and to our communities and to our employees. And the reaction has been big. It's been nothing short of outstanding. And I got to tell you, for people in the real estate industry, it affects positively your bottom line in multiple ways. Your customers want it. You've heard a lot from the technology industry this morning. I understand Mark Benioff was talking. And the fact is they're going to demand it. So we saw this and we led, and I can tell you that it's been tremendous for us, and it really does pay back. So I'm pretty excited about this. In terms of the reward to us beyond the economics, I got to tell you, 90%, this is what my human resources department tells me, 90% of the people who interview at Kilroy mention our sustainability programs as a reason for applying, 90%. And the results, just a quick little summary. At this point, we've been acknowledged, I think 5 years running, as the North American leader in sustainability in real estate. And just last week, we were told by GRESB, that we're now #1 in sustainability amongst publicly traded or listed companies throughout the world. In development, every project we do, as I mentioned, we have about $4.5 billion of developments here in the Bay Area. All of them will be beyond platinum. Another $3 or $4 billion up and down the West Coast. These projects will feature microgrids, on-site water recycling, health-focused design, and much more. But despite these successes, we know we can do more. We don't want to just be the first down the path of sustainable real estate. We want to forge a new one. That is why here at the Global Climate Summit, we are committing to Scope 1 and 2 carbon neutrality by the end of 2020 as validated by the science-based targets. This is not an empty promise. We have already put in place the programs we need to achieve this goal. Maximizing on-site energy reductions, maximizing on-site solar and battery storage, efficient, innovative new construction, adding capacity to the grid via off-site power procurement. So I want to be clear, all these programs have been and will continue to be positive to our bottom line. It inspires our tenants, it inspires our employees. It gives us great kudos and I think great strength with the cities with which we do business. We all know this, you've heard it all day long, there's one Earth. I kind of like the one we have. So I want to make our invisible buildings and everybody else's invisible buildings visible. We're not going to solve this deep environmental problems we have if we don't address real estate. So I am offering the challenge to all of my competitors, all my peers, big and small, get on this wagon. It's a great one to be on. It's personally very fulfilling. I think my time's about up. No, I got another minute according to this. So I told him I would not go over. So if you think about this, the number of people that are in conditioned space in this world has grown exponentially. The number of people in airplanes, and it's all producing bad stuff. And as an industry, we can be part of that solution. So everybody that's an owner or an architect or an engineer, I want to tell you, if you're going to work with Kilroy, you're going to have to show your sustainability credentials. Thank you very much. I know it's going to be a great session for everybody. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, John. He has set us up perfectly for the video we're showing right now called The Future of Net Zero. I'm now going to introduce our panelists. The first panelist who will be joining me is Ibrahim Al-Zubi, who's the Sustainability Officer, Chief Sustainability Officer from Majid Al Futtaim, which is a holding company based in the Middle East. Welcome, Ibrahim. And next I have the Honorable Franz Untersteller, Minister of the Environment, Climate and Energy Sector.
No.
Oh, sorry, we're not. Okay, sorry. We've got Lord Mayor, I've done this twice to the Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor Fran Jensen from the city of Copenhagen. And then we have the Honorable Franz Untersteller, Minister of Environment, Climate and the Energy Sector from Baden-Wittenberg. And then we have the Honorable Eduardo Batllori San Pedro. He's the Minister of the Environment and Urban Development for the Yucatan Peninsula. And we have Shirley Rodriguez joining us, the Deputy Mayor for the Environment and Energy for the City of London. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to start off with some questions for the panelists. And firstly, I guess, welcome everyone to Building Up to Net Zero Carbon Emissions Buildings. And World Green Building Council is the world's largest building network, and we are very proud to co-host this session with C40. We're celebrating the leadership and collaboration opportunities from our networks. This is all about collaboration. This is all about working together. And we're here to address the fact that 39% of global carbon emissions come from buildings. And this afternoon, we'll hear from some of the world's leaders who are taking this issue head on. And with this, we now are proud to launch the World Green Building Council's Net Zero Building Commitment. And we're recognizing, inspiring genuine action at mass scale towards net zero emission buildings. And we're proud to welcome, we're announcing today, 12 businesses, 22 cities, and 4 states and regions to the founding group of signatories to the World Green Building Council's Net Zero Carbon Buildings Commitment. We should actually have a round of applause for that. So we're grateful to our partners across the Green Building Council network, C40, and the Climate Group. Their tireless efforts in bringing this initiative to life. So now looking at our speakers, we're keen to understand more about the commitments you have made today by being here. So Ibrahim, what do you see the signing of this commitment meaning to your business and to you personally?
Thank you for the question. First of all, it's fascinating to see many companies and private sector and cities finally commit and start to walk the talk that we've been talking maybe since the World Sustainable Development Summit in Johannesburg. But we're particularly proud in the United Arab Emirates that we were from the early users of the term net zero and even net positive. This, maybe it's simple, it means net zero or net positive to reach net zero, but it needs a radical change in the way we do business. And this is where it's important for us. We established as a policy to embed sustainability in everything we do. To achieve such a commitment, to say I'm committed won't be enough. To change the way you do business is as important as the commitment. So we started with a new way of business by establishing a database that helped us and allowed us to commit to energy efficiency and energy reduction by 2022. Our net positive commitment is to be, by 2040, net positive in carbon and water. But this means that we have to have a full roadmap. So by 2022, the database allowed us to commit to 37% of energy reduction and water reduction, and that will lead us to net zero, and of course, eventually by 2040 will lead us to give more to the environment than we take. The second part that is important for us, and for me personally, is the partnership part. We can't do this on our own. As a company, without being aligned with the ministry, with the city, and most importantly, with the subject matters expert organizations such as the C40, such as the World Green Building Council, to take the initiative and create a platform for subject matters experts to talk and to get information, technological transfer, how we do this, how we can, I can reach net zero by 2030 or net positive by 2040. The third part, which is, in my opinion, the last piece in the puzzle, is to establish, and this is what we've done, a training program to the 44,000 staff we have within the company. Because changing behavioral, having a behavioral change, changing the mindset of the people who run the business, we will never reach any commitment we have, any key performance indicator, any target. And this is for me personally, is to interact with almost everyone in the business, from the board to the CEOs, to my colleagues in the different operational companies we have, to the people who run our malls and hotels or mixed use or our retail. And to show them that some of them think I'm a tree hugger, that the tree hugger that come to the office every day can make money too. A good example, we managed by just a simple one. I won't talk about the green building policy we have or the investments we have in renewables, but changing the lights in 15 retail stores, of our retail stores, saved us almost $200,000 a month across the country, which 1.5 million kilowatt. Then this managed to lead us to a green building policy. So by default, whatever we build must be green LEED certified, LEED Gold, or BREEAM Very Good. And we managed for the first time, not only in the region, few globally, almost more since last year, in partnership with the government organizations that we have in the United Arab Emirates and the region, is to have a green building policy and a renewable energy policy. So everything we build, a minimum of energy must come from 7.5% of the total energy must come from renewable energy.
I'm gonna.
The last part.
Okay,
the last
point.
part
Okay.
is this target. No, this target is
Passionate.
This target is in the KPI of the CEO, so it's part of his bonus, and this is where we close the puzzle. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ibrahim. So we've had a great corporate perspective, and it'd be great, Lord Mayor, if you could tell us what this means to your city and to your citizens, and what actions you're going to take in Copenhagen.
Maybe you already know that we have a very ambitious climate planning in Copenhagen, in my city. We want to become carbon neutral by 2025, and I'm glad to tell you that we are well underway. We have reduced our CO2 emissions with 42% since 2005. And of course, focus also is in energy efficiency in buildings, both in heating and in electricity. And we hope and we work on a plan to become carbon neutral in our heating system and in our electricity producing in 2025. In Copenhagen, nearly all buildings, 99% of all buildings, private homes, office space and public owned buildings are linked to our very efficient district heating system. Then there's a very big grip into the city that we can secure that all buildings are using CO2 neutral heating in the buildings. The same when it comes to electricity. We are investing a lot of money in renewable, especially in wind turbines. We buy wind turbines outside the city and bring electricity to the city. So looking into Copenhagen, we are a very old city, more than 850 years old city. A lot of historical old buildings are also going to be retrofitted in the coming years. And we invest a lot of money in retrofitting the public-owned, the municipal-owned buildings, but also in partnerships with other in private buildings, so we can reduce the carbon emissions also from the buildings and be a neutral city in the coming years.
Excellent, thank you. Deputy Mayor Rodriguez, can I ask the same question about the city and your citizens and what actions London is looking to take?
So first of all, thank you for having me, and apologies that Sadiq Khan couldn't be here today, the Mayor. Just a bit of context, we published our environment strategy earlier this year, And that sets out the vision for London to become cleaner and greener, to be zero carbon by 2050. That's the environment strategy, but we have a whole host of other strategies that go alongside that, and one of the most important ones for the development of London is the spatial development plan for London, the London Plan, and that sets the standards for new buildings. We have a big problem with retrofitting, which we're also trying to tackle, but in terms of new buildings, that's critical, because that's obviously the buildings that are going to last for years and years, so we need to make them carbon neutral from the beginning. National policy doesn't really exist in this sphere, and that's a real shame, and it's really hampering what we're trying to do in the UK. So what, as a London mayor can do, is set that standard and try and persuade government and others to follow. We have some very good development companies that are working with us to do this, but we do need to set that leadership drive and lead by example. So the commitment that we've signed today and that we've announced, C40 have announced today, is really important in terms of setting how people can work collaboratively to make a difference. The London Plan sets a policy to all major developments, so that's developments of 10 or more residential units, or where a floor space is greater than 1,000 square metres. And it's a really key lever, as I've said, to make that change. And what we do is apply energy hierarchy. So buildings, new developments are, have to, first of all, try and make the building energy efficient. How do we use more renewable energy? And then what we can't do on site is then offset. And we have an offset price. People can have a carbon offset fund. But we don't see that as a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card. It's absolutely how do you reduce the energy efficiency, first of all. And we have a target of meeting a minimum 35% improvement over national regulations, and that's working at the moment. We have a zero carbon policy for all domestic residential homes already, so that's great. And we have announced, the Mayor has announced, that we want to extend that to all non-domestic buildings. So by 2019, that policy will be in place. So all new developments in London will have to be zero carbon, as I've said, which I think is, well beyond, before the sort of 2030 to 2050, because we think it's really critical that we make a move on that whilst we can. And then we're bringing in new energy efficiency targets, a 10% improvement beyond the building regulations I've talked about. But we also think that operational emissions are really important. And so we're asking, we're working with building owners about how we might reduce operational emissions. And we're also looking at them and asking them to start looking at their embodied carbon as well and start to report on that too. We have a number of programs that we're helping to do retrofit, in terms of the schools, hospitals, these are the public sector buildings, and we're doing quite a lot of work on that. It's very slow. The sort of pace of change that we need in London to meet the zero carbon by 2050 requirement would require something like 100,000 buildings to be retrofitted every year, homes that is, and something like 15,000 non-residential buildings a year. We're doing about a couple of thousand, 3,000. We have a real problem. The sort of incentives aren't there, the policies aren't there, the pipeline isn't there, the money is there, but we just can't seem to get it connected, and that's a real challenge, I think, for many cities, however big or small, in terms of retrofit. But what we do have, and a couple of people already mentioned it today, Frank particularly, I think collaboration is absolutely key. And as I've said, we're working with the Green Building Council in London with many developers, and it really is key. We can't underestimate how powerful they can be when they take this on, and when they do, that it's brilliant. And we've had some very good companies that we're working with. We announced today, for example, a partnership with businesses, 11 businesses, from building companies like Landsec, through to engineering companies like Siemens, through to telecoms companies and Sky, who've all committed to work with the city to reduce their footprint, to increase their EV vehicles, to increase their renewable energy take up, and so on. So really good partnerships, which I think really shows what is possible in London with non-state actors working together, government and business.
Fantastic, thank you. Minister Untersteller, how will regional scale action support the level of action needed to decarbonize our buildings?
First, I would like to thank you to get the opportunity to take part in this discussion about the zero net building for the next years. Maybe I should start with the situation in Baden-Württemberg. We're the only state which is led by the Green Party since 2011, and that means that the fighting against the climate change is in the center of politics in my state. And so what does it mean? We started with a climate change act in 2013, where we have got a solid base with the target to reduce the CO2 emissions by 25% to the year of 2020. You have to know that we're a state where we have had in the past 50% by the electricity by nuclear plants, and we reduced the nuclear plants to 0 to the year 2022. But it's necessary that we reduce this also, not by building new plants of coal. And that means that it's necessary that we have an increasing by renewables in the next years. And for example, the renewables in the electricity sector, we started with a base of 70%, and now we're on a level of 28, 29%. And also we know that the building sector, which is in the middle of this discussion, it's necessary that we will get it on a level of maybe 0% and just to the year 2050. And actually, the building sector is responsible for around 30% of the CO2 emissions in my region. Baden-Württemberg is a region with 11 million people. We have maybe around 3 million buildings, mostly old buildings, mostly buildings which were constructed in a period where we don't have had some restrictions of energy efficiency. And so the work is to reconstruct these buildings in the next years and to get more efficiency in these buildings. And this is one. And on the other side, it's necessary that we realize more renewable energy for heating system in this building. Actually, we have, that's the only state in Germany which have a Renewable Energy Act in the heating sector. And if you change your heating system in a residential building, but also in non-residential building, there are requirements where it said you're responsible that you bring 50% by renewables. Yeah, you cannot change from an oil heating system to an oil heating system, or from a gas heating system to another gas heating system. You have to bring 50% by renewables as minimum. And if you don't like to do this, you have to bring more efficiency measures in your buildings to reduce CO2 emissions. And this means that this is a success story. And unfortunately, we are the only state in Germany which have realized such a Renewable Energy Act on the state level. The owners of buildings, if they change the heating technologies, they will get some information also from the regional energy agencies, which we have. Actually, we have 35 regional agencies which give information by experts to house owners, also to communities, and also to small companies. And this is the base that we get good results if we change the systems, and also if we will get more efficiency in the buildings. And unfortunately, just now, we only have a rate of 1% of rebuilding of old houses, and we get more efficiency in this 1% of buildings, but it's not enough. You know, the Paris Agreement said we have to bring maybe 90% less of CO2 emissions just to the year 2050, and that means that it's necessary that we grow on a level of 2%, better 3% of reconstruction of buildings every year, and that's the that's necessary to realize this in the next years with more efforts of our state. And if we are successful, and it's necessary that we are successful with the 3 million buildings which we have in our state, that means that we can reduce 17 million tons of carbon, and I'm sure that we will get this target to the year 2050.
Excellent. Good. Thank you so much. Minister Bat-Lori, the same question around regional scale action for the Yucatan.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. First, I'm sorry, I don't speak English very good, and then I'm going to read the answer, if you don't mind. At the national level, Mexico has manifested its commitment to fight against climate change in alignment with the Paris Agreement, establishing an unconstrained goal of reducing GHG emissions for 22% to 2030. Where the most strategic sectors for the reduction of emissions are included being this electricity generation, residential and commercial sector, oil and gas. In this sense, the state of Yucatan, in addition to the commitment to address the causes of climate change, established in 2014 a roadmap to the significant reduction of GHG emissions through the publication of the Special Program for Action Against Climate Change, where a mitigation goal of 20% reduction of GHG emissions to 2018 and a goal of 30% reduction of emissions to 2030, based on the year 2015, is established. Among the outstanding contribution of this program was the sectorial analysis of GHG emissions, which allowed to identification of substantive areas for the reduction of emissions, being the main one of the energy sector, which generates of the 55% of the total emission in the state. In this sense, Yucatan has generated a strategy for carbon management through different bodies preceded by the governor of the state, such as the Intersecretarial Commission on Climate Change in Yucatan, the Renewable Energy Council, whose actions are coordinated through the Ministry of Urban Development and Environment, particularly the Director of Planning and Policies for Sustainability. As part of the actions to reduce the state carbon footprint, in June 2017, within the framework of the International Environment Day, the Carbon Management Plan was announced by the governor in order to contribute to the position of the state as a leader in sustainability and mitigation of climate change, incorporating environmental friendly practice and technologies in public buildings. A program developed in 5 stages: planning, definition of baselines and goals, identification, quantification, and prioritization of opportunities for GHG reduction, implementation, and evaluation, whose objective is focused on mitigating the impact of public administration on climate change through energy efficiency and the use of renewable energies that generate environmental and economic benefits. Base year 2015 data on public administration emissions indicate that transport, 46%, and electric power, 55%, generate a total of 84,000 tons of CO2, with an approximate cost of $20 million. Considering a target base of reduction of 10% to 2020, a reduction of almost 9,000 tons of CO2 is expected, with a cumulative saving of more than $6 million, being a viable and profitable alternative with an internal rate of return of 30%, where for each dollar applied, a profit of $3 is generated. Conclusions: it's possible and feasible, technical and political, decarbonize the public buildings with high benefits to our budget and to efficient uses for public resources.
Gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ibrahim, can you share with us, fairly succinctly if you could, how you got your board accepting of this and the pioneering level of the ambition that Majid Al Fatim has undertaken.
Well, first of all, being in the United Arab Emirates helped me. We have visionary leaders to start with, either by the founding father of the United Arab Emirates, late Sheikh Zayed, who was one of the first green leaders. So technically, part of my job was done by the leaders of the United Arab Emirates. But when I needed to translate, and I think this is a key thing, to translate what we talk here to the business people there, to the board. I remember the first time I went to present to the board, asking them for money for energy efficiency. It was a challenge for me because I needed to speak their language. And I knew that I have 5 minutes, either I get the money or not. So the first thing I've done is I forgot about the tree hugging part, I forgot about the environment, but I showed them what is that how doing well by doing good means, which means investing in energy efficiency means that we're gonna make more money, we're gonna reduce operational cost, and at the same time, we're gonna help the environment. That was the first thing. So in brief, the bottom line for this is we really need to talk not to the usual suspects. I was so happy to see in this morning in the opening remarks, not so depressing remarks, to say, like with the numbers from Christina or Johan, that we have progress. People, who is investing in renewables? Who is investing in buildings? Private sector, governments. So we're on the right track, but I think it's time for us to talk to the business people, to talk to the decision makers, talk to the opposition, climate deniers, show them it works. And I think this is what happened here. I showed them that it works, and then the rest is history. I don't need to present things to them anymore. They're aligned.
Okay, good, thank you. Lord Mayor Jensen, I mean, this is a unique collaborative experience, and having business and subnational governments support this, and it's really a coordinated local effort for a global problem. And so from your perspective, how does the corporate world, how do the businesses fit into the Copenhagen Plan?
Energy efficiency is the most cost-effective ways to realize our climate policy. And I think that's what we all can look into. Private persons, the public money. We can see it's a very good business case in our investments in retrofitting, in doing our buildings carbon neutral, because you can save a lot of money. So we have the oil crisis in the 70s in Europe. It was a wake-up call for many governments and decision makers at city level and also in private households to reduce our electricity and our use of heat in buildings. And we have this long tradition in Denmark to focus on energy-efficient buildings. And last year we were awarded in Copenhagen by C40 for our new initiatives to make a monitoring of the 2.8 million of public-owned square meters of buildings in my city, square meters owned by the city. So we can directly monitoring the use of heat and electricity in all our buildings. And that's very good, because then we can show what works and what doesn't when it comes to reduce our energy consumption in the building. And I fully agree that we cannot do that alone in the politicians and our civil servants in City Hall. We have to make partnership with the private sector. We have an energy lab in Copenhagen with the private sector, with a lot of stakeholders, where we show not only what is the best practice for innovation and technology at the moment, also innovate new solutions together with the business and industry, so they can sell that product, that technology to the city as a city solution, a sustainable city solution to Copenhagen. And we can show to our colleagues in the C40 network what is the best solution. If it works in Copenhagen, it can work in every other cities. And that's what it's all about in our network in C40. It is to share what is the best practice at the moment, and also look into the future, what will be the best practice in the next 5-10 years And Copenhagen, we want to share all our solutions with our friends in other municipalities. We also want to steal ideas from other colleagues. That's a legal way to steal. It's only when it's about ideas.
That's that collaboration piece that we're talking about. Thank you. I'm always mindful of time, and we do have a speaker, Anita Arjundas, who's the Managing Director of the Mahindra Lifespace Development Limited Group, and I'm not sure if she's going to come out. There she is. Hello, welcome.
Give her a hand.
Thank you. Firstly, my compliments to the cities, regions, and private sector enterprises that have stepped up and taken on some very large commitments with respect to carbon neutrality. Delivering on the 2030 and 2050 goals are going to call for a transformative shift from all of us in the way we design, build, operate, and financially structure our built assets. The current stock of around 500 commercial net zero buildings and around 2,000 homes will significantly need to be ramped up if we need to meet these goals. And what I thought I'd do over the next few minutes really is speak about my own experiences. One, in developing a carbon positive city in the outskirts of North India. And second is stepping back and looking at a decade-old experience around the adoption of green buildings in India. So let me start with the C40's carbon positive program and the journey that we've been through over the last few years in terms of trying to create a city that, as it is completed, would be not just carbon neutral, but carbon positive in terms of what it gives back to the environment. This is a 3,000-acre development to the north of India, and the essential premise of this development is large-scale urban programs in the outskirts of cities, which would create livelihoods, but also ensure that there is living and life attached to that zone of livelihood, so that people don't have to commute long distances to get to their place of work. They actually live in a work, live, learn, play environment distributed over a large-scale built environment. The early focus of our planning early was on energy efficiency at the utility scale, and secondly at water management. And I think the context of water here was extremely important, because you're talking about the state of Rajasthan, which is water-starved, and it was important for us to be conscious of the fact that in creating a new built environment, we don't call upon too much of freshwater resources. So not only do we have the typical 2 water pipelines running across the city, one for fresh water and the other for treated secondary water, which is used for flushing and irrigation, but we actually have a third line, a line which brings in the city's sewerage water, treats it, and uses it for industrial purposes. So these are some of the ways that we've tried to kind of structure the city around a more resource-efficient way of planning and building the city out. The second has been really in terms of bringing in renewable energy. Early stages there, we've just gotten rooftop solar in all our buildings, but the idea is to spread that even more further and do both on-site and off-site solar access. The third is around transportation aggregation, and the fourth finally is about how do we get all of our clients to really adopt a net zero strategy for their own buildings, because a lot of the built environment in this city would not be created by us but by our customers. And really it's about, we've noticed in one of our earlier cities in Chennai that the minute you get a certain quality of like-minded people into a development and everybody is out there putting out best practices, that leadership is definitely followed and others come in and follow suit. And you, over a period of time, what starts out as a small change becomes a movement where more and more companies are seeking to move towards a more carbon neutral environment. And that kind of takes me back to a decade back when the green movement started in India. When we initiated green developments in the residential sector, there were 0 green residential buildings in India. This is way back in 2006. There were just a few commercial green buildings driven by the fact that some of the multinational customers were seeking green developments to reduce their operating charges, so it was very commercially driven. But in the context of residential, where we do not create rental stock, but actually sell to own, there really wasn't a business case for green buildings. The first building that we built out in 2006 was platinum rated, and it costed us about 3 to 4% more than what it would do if we did not go green. 3 to 4% is a large number that, yes, you could get started on as a demonstration of leadership, and to be out there on the ground and proving that things could be done green. But if we wanted more of the industry to adopt green, then we really couldn't continue with that 3 to 4% kind of cost structure. So we actually chipped away over the next 4 years at cost structures to look at frugal innovation solutions. And at the end of 4 years, got down that incremental cost of going green for a platinum building to less than 1%. This allowed us in 2010 to take 100% of our portfolio to green. And since then, our entire residential portfolio has been green. But it's really not about stopping at what you are doing as one individual or one enterprise, but seeing how you can actually carry the rest of the industry along with you. And that kind of set us thinking about how can we actually stimulate demand and encourage supply. And it led to the creation of the Sustainable Housing Leadership Consortium in India, co-founded by us and IFC. But we got in 4 other developers, like-minded developers, to come on board. And the objective there really was to push the envelope in terms of getting more and more companies to commit to a green portfolio. So to start with, the 4 who joined us by 2020, but thereafter, at least 25% of the Indian industry in the residential sector to be green by 2022. And as a part of that initiative, I think we realized that there were 3 important levers. One was what we heard a lot about today, progressive policies, driven by the cities, driven by governments, to actually help shape supply and encourage demand. Second is consumer awareness. And the third really is about how can we get the cost of technology down? How can we upskill resources to handle that technology in a mass scale? So the second thing that we did as an outcome of the SHLC was actually set up a Center of Excellence for Sustainable Habitats. This is a research institute sponsored by us through CSR funds, but open source in partnership with the leading Energy Efficiency and Climate Change Institute in India, TERI. And the idea is to really develop building envelopes and building standards that would provide coherent databases for the industry to adopt in terms of moving on energy efficiency in the residential sector. And I think just what I wanted to leave here in terms of the last takeaways is that even for the net zero carbon movement with respect to buildings to take shape, it is really important for us to look at how do we bring that 3 pieces to work together: consumer awareness and demand, technology costs going down, and progressive policies coming together to be able to shape more and more so that thousands can actually become billions. Because at the end of the day, a society is not defined by just what we create, but also what we decide not to destroy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is fantastic because we still have about half a minute left to stay on schedule with 2 very important announcements. Firstly, we confirmed our founding group ahead of the summit, but we have exciting news about 2 additional signatories that have just recently happened. The first is the Scottish Government in the UK has joined the commitment, so that's exciting. And also, because we are going for diversity and we're going for private sector and we're going for subnationals as well, we have the Sydney Opera House Trust in Australia has joined. A few Australians in the house, obviously. And so please join me in thanking our fantastic panel. We really look forward to hearing more, and thank you for sharing how you intend to convert your commitment into action. So thank you so much. Pardon? Yes, we do, and I should get rid of my stuff.